What's up guys, hope you're having a good day. In this video we're going to be taking a deep dive into each of the main card fights taking place this weekend at UFC 292. We're going to be taking a look at these fights from a betting perspective, and hopefully you'll be able to use the information in this video to make better betting decisions and maybe even earn some extra cash. And I want to start this video off by saying a big thank you to everyone that helped me research the fight between Sean O'Malley and Aljamain Sterling when we did a live stream research session for the fight yesterday. Loads of people dropped major knowledge in that stream, let me know about a bunch of things I wasn't aware of, and it's just way more fun researching fights as a group. So I really appreciate everyone that showed up to that, and I'm definitely going to be doing more of them in the future. I was thinking of doing one next weekend, or for next weekend's fight, but obviously the main event between Max Holloway and Korean Zombie is probably going to be a little bit dead from a betting point of view. You'd expect Holloway to win that pretty easily, so it doesn't seem like there's much point doing a live stream for that fight. So maybe we'll do one for the week after, because Cyril Gane versus Sergey Spivak could be super duper interesting. Hit the like button below and leave a comment if you'd like me to do a live stream for that fight. So don't want to waste your guys' times. We're going to get right into the breakdowns in just a moment. But so that I don't waste anyone's time, just want to let you guys know that I do think this is a really difficult card for betting. I haven't got any bets on this card myself yet. Obviously, we're going to go into a lot of detail on each of those fights and explaining to you how I see them from a betting point of view. But yeah, I think this is a pretty difficult card from a betting point of view. And because of that, I'm really struggling with this one. Certainly nothing as strong as Yasmin Lasindu on last week's card that we were able to hit a winner on. This card's really tricky. If you do want to live bet with me this weekend though, which is my bread and butter, it's my speciality, you can head on over to my website. If you just go to betting tips, click live betting, you can sign up for my live betting tips for this weekend. If you don't like it, just message me, DM me, send me an email, something like that. Will get you a refund, no problem. And as you can see, live betting, or live in-play betting as it's called in some parts of the world, it's my speciality, and we make a profit pretty much every month when we live bet the UFC. So if you're interested in that, give it a try. I'm sure you'll like it very much. But now let's kick things off by breaking down the main event between Aljamain Sterling and Sean O'Malley. So if we start off by taking a look at the odds on this one, we can see that Aljamain Sterling is a pretty big favourite at average odds of around 1.38, which is going to be minus 263 for an implied probability of 72%. If we take a look at the odds on his opponent, Sean O'Malley, he's going to be around an average of 3.0, which is going to be plus 200 for an implied probability of 33%. So Aljamain Sterling is 34 years old, 5'7" with a 71-inch reach, and Sean O'Malley, 28 years old, 5'11" with a 72-inch reach. So there are a couple of small X factors for us to talk about on this one. The first one being that Aljamain Sterling has said that he's moving up to featherweight after this fight. So this will be his last fight at bantamweight. He said that the weight cuts to bantamweight are getting very difficult for him, and he wants to move aside and let his friend and training partner Merab Dvalishvili have his time in the spotlight, which I thought was a really cool thing of Aljamain to do. You love to see it, man. And what's interesting is, even if O'Malley were to win this weekend against Sterling, then he's got another massive challenge to face in Dvalishvili. But anyway, we'll talk about that another day if ever it happens. In terms of the age, there's not a whole lot going on really here with age. I mean, Aljamain is pretty old for a bantamweight at 34, but he's not showing any signs of decline. If anything, he's showing signs of improvement. We'll talk a little bit about some of the areas that he's improving as we get through this breakdown. And another X factor is obviously the size between these two. You can see that O'Malley is obviously a lot longer, a lot taller than Sterling. But I think one of the things that makes Sterling so tricky is that he has an abnormally long reach for his height. So at 5'7", having a 71-inch reach is very long. And you can see that O'Malley's pretty much got the same reach. So they both got pretty much the same reach I don't think size is going to play too much of a factor in this fight, because even though technically Sean O'Malley is the bigger guy at 5'11", there's strengths and weaknesses to every body type, and obviously with O'Malley, he is long and he's tall and he does a great job of using his length. But obviously with Aljamain Sterling having that smaller, compact, more muscular frame, he's a lot more physically imposing in grappling positions than O'Malley is. So there's strengths and weaknesses to both body types. I don't think either guy's got an advantage when it comes to size here. They have advantages in their own ways. Now, in terms of how these two match up from a stylistic point of view, everyone knows that it's a classic striker versus grappler, right? And I think no matter how you feel about this fight, we can all agree that if the fight stays standing, O'Malley is going to do very well. And if the fight goes to the ground, Sterling is going to do very well. So when we're analysing this fight from a betting point of view, really, we only need to answer one question, and we're going to have a pretty good idea of who's most likely to win this. And the question we need to ask is, can Aljamain Sterling get Sean O'Malley down and keep him down for long enough to win the fight, right? Because if Aljamain Sterling dominates Sean O'Malley for 3 out of the 5 rounds with grappling, that's going to be enough for him to win. And so when we're researching this fight, that was a big focus of our research, just focusing on answering that one question. Because very early on in researching the fight, just by watching a little bit of footage of Sterling striking, a little bit of footage of O'Malley striking, you can see that O'Malley has got an absolutely massive advantage when it comes to striking. O'Malley's footwork, his movement, his striking defense, his ability to read his opponent, he's just absolutely brilliant. And while there are levels to the game when it comes to grappling, there's levels to the game when it comes to striking as well. And Sean O'Malley is just levels and levels and levels above Aljamain Sterling. But even though O'Malley will outstrike Sterling by a wide margin on the feet, when we were doing the live stream research session for this fight, a lot of people were saying that they're going to bet on O'Malley because they think he's going to knock Aljamain Sterling out. What I would say for anyone that thinks an O'Malley knockout in this fight is quite likely is that while I do feel O'Malley is going to be able to outstrike Sterling and be very comfortable on the feet, I don't think O'Malley is going to be able to cause Sterling that many problems. In terms of, I don't think O'Malley is going to be able to inflict that much damage on Sterling, at least not early in the fight. The only way that I could see O'Malley inflicting a lot of damage on Sterling and hurting him is if we saw Sterling slow down like he has in, some of his fights in the past. And if he were to become, too tired to get the takedowns and too tired to defend himself on the feet. If that were to happen, then yeah, you could see O'Malley start to light Sterling up. But while Sterling is fresh, I don't see O'Malley hurting Sterling that much on the feet. And the reason why I say that is because in order to land clean, hard, impactful, significant strikes on your opponent or to knock them out, you need to either catch them with a big counter or they need to be willing to exchange with you, right? So if we think about just those two aspects of the striking for a moment, could Sean O'Malley counter Aljamain and knock him out? 100%. I actually think this is the most likely way O'Malley could get a knockout. If, for example, Sterling were to mistime a takedown or shoot a takedown from too far out of O'Malley's range, O'Malley does such a good job of reading his opponents, and he's so confident, he's so accurate. I could see him catching Aljamain with, a crazy flying knee counter knockout, like the kind that we saw Corey Sandhagen land on Frankie Edgar or Jorge Masvidal land on Ben Askren. I think O'Malley could definitely get a knockout like that because Aljamain is very guilty of telegraphing some takedowns, shooting from too far outside of his opponent's range, and when Aljamain starts to get tired, he shoots from further and further away, which puts him at more and more risk of counters. But at distance, I'd be very surprised if O'Malley were able to knock Aljamain out. Like, a lot of people were saying, I'm going O'Malley by head kick knockout, this kind of stuff, right? For me, that's extremely unlikely, because in order to knock someone out on the feet, like I say, you've either got to counter them, and because Sterling isn't going to be the aggressor when it comes to striking, if O'Malley is the lander counter, it's going to be off the back of a failed takedown attempt. The other way in which you'd have to get a knockout were to land a big, hard, impactful shot in a big exchange, right? And that's very unlikely to happen because Aljamain isn't someone that exchanges. Aljamain is not someone that is interested in striking with you. Sure, we see, large periods of Aljamain's fights stay standing, but for the most part, this is for him to pace himself and conserve energy for when he wants to grapple, because Aljamain's the kind of guy that does slow quite a bit if he's forced to grapple hard. And because Aljamain is one of the best fighters in the world, he's super intelligent, he recognizes that. So he uses striking as a way to kind of, control his breathing, get his heart rate back under control, slow the pace of the fight down so that he can recharge his batteries to go hard again with the grappling. So Aljamain generally isn't someone that is going to exchange with you. He's not going to come forward and attack you. If you come forward and attack him, he's just going to look to use his length, back up and circle away. And Aljamain's quite happy to stand in the middle of the octagon or on the outside, exchanging leg kicks and jabs. But in order to knock someone out, generally speaking, they've got to either come forward and really commit to attacking you on the feet and then you can counter them in an exchange, or you've got to kind of pressure them so much and put them onto the back foot so much that they just get overwhelmed, can't defend themselves, and they can't see the shots coming. Again, that's quite unlikely for two reasons. The first reason being Aljamain Sterling is very good at using his length to stay out of a range where he can be hit. The second reason is because in order for O'Malley to really take the fight to Sterling and put him in a position where he could overwhelm him with pressure and land a kill shot, he will have to be the aggressor, come forward very aggressively, and if he does that, he's going to leave himself wide open to the takedown. So I don't think it's that likely O'Malley is going to have a whole lot of success on the feet in terms of doing damage and landing impactful strikes, but he will outstrike Sterling by being the more technically skilled fighter. Now we're going to obviously move on to grappling, and in one respect, this is a tricky fight to predict because Sean O'Malley's run to the title reminds me a lot of Conor McGregor's run to the title. I don't want to call Sean O'Malley protected. I don't want to call Conor McGregor protected. But if you guys think back to Conor McGregor's first title run to featherweight when he beat Jose Aldo and won that featherweight title, if you look back at all the guys Conor faced, in fact, we can do it now. If we just bring up his record, you'll see exactly what I mean. So, Conor McGregor came into the UFC in 2013, made his debut against Marcus Brimage. He didn't actually fight a wrestler until he faced Chad Mendes in 2015. But Chad Mendes came into that fight on like a week's notice and also had a broken foot. So he gassed out midway through round 2. Conor was able to take over and get a stoppage in round 2. If you look at the guys Conor fought, Marcus Brimage was a striker, Holloway a striker, Diego Brandao a striker, Poirier a striker, Dennis Siver was a striker. He then fought a wrestler, but like I say, it wasn't the best version of Mendes, coming on less than a week's notice with a broken foot. So Mendes wasn't seriously, he was nowhere near his best. Jose Aldo a striker, Nate Diaz a striker, Eddie Alvarez a striker. It wasn't until Conor fought Khabib that Conor actually faced an elite UFC level grappler. 5 years after he first made his debut against Marcus Brimage. Think about that. Conor was in the UFC for 5 years before he faced a decent MMA grappler, and we all saw what Khabib did to him. And Sean O'Malley, is, you know, in a pretty similar position. He made his debut all the way back in 2017, so 6 years ago now. Terrian Ware, striker. Andre Sukumtar, striker. Jose Quinones, striker. Eddie Wineland, striker. Marlon Vera, striker. Thomas Almeida, striker. Chris Matinho, striker. Raulian Paiva, a little bit of everything to be fair, but striker. Pedro Munhoz, high-level Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt, but never tries to take anyone down. Predominantly a striker. Peter Yan, striker. So, similar to Conor, O'Malley has been in the UFC for 6 years, and this weekend will be the first time he's ever fought an elite UFC level MMA grappler. So, because of that, it's kind of difficult to know how O'Malley is going to hold up in the grappling positions, because if you look at all of O'Malley's O'Malley's fights in the UFC, every single one of them, the only guy that has really tried to take him down was Peter Yan. And even though Peter Yan had a little bit of success with grappling in that fight, O'Malley also had a decent amount of success defending himself in those grappling positions. And we can go off track and focus a lot on cage grabs and all that stuff, but ultimately it was a mixed bag from O'Malley. There were flashes of really good stuff in terms of defensive wrestling, and then at other times not so good stuff, shall we say. But Peter Yan is a kickboxer, right? Yes, he's a decent MMA grappler, but he's nowhere near the level that Aljamain Sterling is when it comes to MMA grappling. So if Peter Yan can get O'Malley down and have some success against him on the ground, makes you question what Sterling could potentially be able to do. So you guys know me. You know what I always say, right? Everyone's got an opinion, but I like to deal in facts, right? Opinions are worthless. I much prefer to deal in facts. And the only place you'll find facts, truth and honesty in this game is in the fight footage, because ultimately the fight footage shows us what is true. You know, it is what it is. It can only be interpreted for what it is in one way, and it's undeniable. So rather than us kind of use words to describe how Sean O'Malley's takedown defense looks, let's all just watch it together. And like I say, unfortunately, this is pretty much the only fight that we've got which shows us any of O'Malley's takedown defense, because no one else has really tried to take him down. Sorry, I'm in the wrong fight here, guys. Let me just grab you the link to the correct one. 2 seconds. I've gone to Aljamain Peter Yan instead of O'Malley Peter Yan.
Folks, featured.
Here we go. Alright, so let's take a look at his takedown defense together. And like I say, O'Malley's takedown defense and ground game looked a lot better than I thought it would. Because ultimately Peter Yan is a decent offensive wrestler, but is it going to be good enough to neutralise the threat of Aljamain's grappling? That's another story. So here we can see the first takedown entry of the fight from Yan. Nice deep double leg takedown. And you can see straight away pretty good balance from O'Malley. He recognises that it's very important for him to try and use the cage as a base to defend the takedown. So he keeps that, he scrambles over to the cage as soon as the shot comes and keeps his left side tight to the cage, so that even if Peter Yan did complete the takedown, he would be able to use the cage to wall walk back up to his feet. And straight away you see O'Malley go into wrist control to prevent Peter Yan from getting the body lock, and does a really good job of stuffing that very first takedown. Now is the next one. Minute and 30 left to go. So one thing that really impressed me about O'Malley in this fight. Now he does get taken down here, but what really impressed me about O'Malley is that when Peter Yan came forward aggressively like this and closed the distance, O'Malley recognised pretty early on in this fight that Peter Yan was pressuring him up against the cage to shoot a takedown. What really impressed me about O'Malley is that his ability to read his opponents is so good that even when he was preoccupied by the threat of the takedown and keeping his hands down low in a position to dig underhooks and start dealing with the takedown attempt, he was still able to use head movement to evade the head strikes that Jan was throwing to set the takedown up, which is kind of amazing. It's not something many guys can do. Like, how often do you see it where a guy's very aware that a takedown attempt is coming, so he's carrying his hands low, and as the person trying to take him down comes forward to shoot the takedown, they throw some strikes that open up the lower body, expecting the guy defending the takedown to bring his hands up to block the strikes. And if they don't do that, they keep their hands low, they just get lit up and they take 2-3 clean hard shots. O'Malley's able to deal with the takedown and evade the head strikes. Like, sometimes O'Malley is able to stuff the takedown. We'll see a little bit in that in round 2. Sometimes he's not. Like on this occasion, he does get taken down. But I was very impressed with O'Malley's ability to do that. And this is where it goes back to what I was saying right at the beginning of this breakdown, where I could actually see O'Malley knocking Sterling out with like a flying knee counter, like a Sandhagen, Edgar, Masvidal, Askren type knockdown or knockout. Because what that ability to slip shots in that moment shows when his opponent's shooting for a takedown is that O'Malley is very focused and very aware of everything that is happening. And that's where these counter knees, those counter flying knees can come from. In this instance, he's choosing not to throw them. I think partially because he respects Jan's ability to get in deep on the legs and complete the takedowns, so he prioritises the takedown. But if against Sterling, he just accepts that Sterling's probably going to take him down anyway, so he may as well try and counter the takedown attempt with a knee. Things would get very interesting. But anyway, let's fire this back up. Let's see this takedown attempt. So beautiful takedown entry here from Jan, but just look at the head movement of O'Malley as Jan is shooting in. Look. No, do you see? As Jan's coming in for the takedown, notice how O'Malley's just able to use his length to slip back. It's beautiful work. But anyway, Jan gets in really deep on this double leg takedown, picks O'Malley up, dumps him on the ground. But straight away, O'Malley's doing good stuff. He's got his back tight to the cage, which he can use to start the wall walk. He's trying to push down on the head of Jan. And yes, Jan scoots his butt out from up against the cage, flattens him out. But O'Malley's trying to do the correct stuff. You see a lot of guys with O'Malley's body type that are abnormally long and tall for their division, and they have a tendency to look pretty weak on the ground. But straight away, O'Malley's all trying to do the correct stuff. When he's on his back, he's trying to go to the active guard and create space for himself off his back and pop back up. You can see him do that here. And to be fair, O'Malley does work his way back up to his feet here. And I don't want to take anything away from O'Malley, because for someone with his body type, his takedown offense and defensive wrestling in this matchup looked pretty good. But where he scrambles back up to his feet here, this is kind of 50% of the stuff O'Malley is doing and 50% of the stuff that Peter Yan is doing, or 50% of the mistakes that Peter Yan is making. Because if we slow this right down, yes, O'Malley does a good job of using his active guard to create enough space off his back to scramble back up to his feet in the first place, but he also gets helped because Yan postures up and throws ground and pound. So instead of Yan using his arms to kind of try and, you know, hold O'Malley down or re-establish a dominant position or take O'Malley back down or even keep him back up against the cage, instead he throws short shots with his right hand, which then allows O'Malley to just stand back up. Watch. So he's got with his left hand grabbing the ankle of O'Malley. But what he really needs is to gain control of O'Malley's body so that O'Malley can't pop back up, and he just doesn't. He chooses to throw punches instead. And O'Malley's like, thank you very much. As soon as I free my left leg, there we go. I'm just going to stand back up. So O'Malley did all the correct stuff. Absolutely brilliant stuff. But he was kind of helped by that mistake that Yan made. And again, there's no doubt O'Malley's got a big advantage on the feet. So we're really just prioritising, taking a look at his grappling here, so you guys can start to understand how he stacks up with Aljamain. So into this second round now. Not really a takedown. I mean, it kind of is, but obviously O'Malley was hurt off that left hand, so he gave that takedown up very easily when he was kind of a little bit disorientated and was turned to his side. Can't help but feel that obviously that left hand, you know, made it a little bit easier for Yan to get that takedown. You don't want to hold that against O'Malley because he's shown really good balance and strong hips in you know, other aspects of this fight. So anyway, he's on his back here, flattened out in a closed guard. Now here he does look pretty weak off his back, predominantly because he's nowhere near the cage. I think O'Malley is someone that really needs the cage to use as a base to wall walk back up to his feet. So I wouldn't expect to see O'Malley fight at distance this weekend. O'Malley is way too smart for that. You're not going to see O'Malley stood in the middle of the octagon trying to kickbox with Aljamain, and you're also not going to see O'Malley pressuring Sterling on the outside either, because O'Malley knows if he gets taken down in the middle of the octagon, it's going to be very difficult for him to work his way back up to his feet with how strong and physically imposing Sterling is. So O'Malley's going to want to stay on the outside, you know, in this area here, on the outside of that black line, with his back relatively close to the cage, so that when Aljamain does shoot, his first line of defense will be using the cage as a base to defend the takedown, and his second line of defense will be, you know, if Aljamain does get the takedown, then hopefully he'll be able to use the cage to wall walk back up. Because if O'Malley gets taken down in this position, he's going to be in a world of trouble. I mean, you can even see with Peter Yan on top of him, he's looking pretty weak off his back. He's not doing a particularly good job of creating space off his back. A little bit here with the armbar attempt, but for the most part, Yan's able to stack him, overpower him, and overwhelm him from top position. And we know Aljamain is a much more physically imposing grappler than Peter Yan is. Also, we also know that Aljamain Sterling is lightning fast with his back takes. And so in these scrambles where O'Malley's trying to work his way back up to his feet, you know, even from a position like this, you know, you go watch the second Aljamain versus Peter Yan fight. I mean, literally, Sterling only needs a little window of opportunity like this where there's enough space here near O'Malley's right leg to slip a hook in. And he'll slip that hook in. He'll take it. No problem. No problem whatsoever. So, you know, O'Malley's doing his best here. But there's a lot of things that Yan's doing, which is making O'Malley pay to some degree. But at the same time, Yan's making certain mistakes that's kind of letting O'Malley off the hook. And Yan isn't making O'Malley pay for certain things and certain positions in ways that Sterling could. And again, O'Malley just gives up a really weak outside trip there. So we'll keep skipping through. Another double leg takedown entry here from Yan. But again, look at how well O'Malley defends himself from the strikes to set the takedown up. Very impressive. Watch. Look, blocks the head kick, slip. Look at the speed. Yo, look, at the end of the day, this is a really, really tough fight for Sean O'Malley. There's no way to dress it up. But everyone's got strengths and weaknesses. And just let's slow this down and appreciate it, because it's absolutely fucking brilliant. Look at the head movement of O'Malley and the ability to read Peter Yan, even when he's under pressure. Even when he's at risk of being taken down in a massive fight, high stakes fight. A guy that's already been taking him down. Look at his ability to keep his composure. Just look at this in slow-mo. Watch. Head kick comes. His hands are down low because the reason why O'Malley's got his hands down low here is because he's expecting a takedown entry. So he wants his hands down low to dig those underhooks as soon as Yan shoots. But watch this. Even though he's expecting a takedown entry, right? The head kick comes. Look at it. Blocked. No problem. Watch this now. Right hand comes. Slipped. Mate, it is beautiful. Watch. Left hand follow up. Misses. Ducked under it. Yo, it's so cool. I could watch this shit all day. Look, hands are low, expecting a takedown attempt. Within a fraction of a second, O'Malley reads the head kick. Blocked. He's coming with the right hand. Slips. Coming with the left hand, ducks under. Mate, it's fucking Matrix shit. So look, yeah, it's a tough fight for O'Malley. There's no way to dress it up. But everyone's got strengths and weaknesses. And O'Malley's ability to read his opponents, his striking defense, second to none. And sequences like that can turn into knockouts. Because in these positions, O'Malley's very preoccupied by the threat of the takedown. Who knows if if he'll be a little bit more boisterous, you know, throw a little bit more caution to the wind this weekend against Sterling. And as Sterling's coming forward, instead of looking to like slip stuff and deal with a takedown, who knows if O'Malley's going to be looking for the kill shots up the middle, the straight punch counters, the flying knees. Who knows, man? Who knows? Who knows? I'm looking forward to finding out. Anyway, Yan obviously shoots a very nice deep double leg. O'Malley got an underhook here on the left side, an overhook on the right side. He also tries to create a nice wide base against the cage. Connects his hands together. But then O'Malley does make a little bit of a mistake here. He tries to go to wrist control instead of an underhook, which I understand why he's going to wrist control there, because he's trying to stop Yan from connecting his hands together on a double leg. But I think that's the wrong decision in this position, in my opinion, because for me, because O'Malley is so much longer and taller than Yan, the wide base is going to make it difficult for Yan to connect his hands together anyway. Rather than going to wrist control here to prevent the double leg, I think it would have been a better decision to dig a really deep underhook and force Yan to have to fight that underhook on O'Malley's left side. A little bit of a mistake from O'Malley, but, you know, it is what it is. He's still learning, and you can see, because he doesn't have that underhook, I mean, his left arm is, you know, is only helping to break his fall here and maybe post as he hits the canvas. But he should have had an underhook on that left side, and because he didn't, he got taken down. So that's a bit of a mistake from O'Malley. But anyway, gives up a cheap double leg, in my opinion. Perhaps could have been avoided with an underhook. And, yeah, man. Gives up a pretty cheap takedown, pretty weak takedown. Looks pretty weak off his back. Into the third round, where we see a lot of those notorious cage grabs that a lot of people have talked about in the build-up to this fight. So here we go. Here's a single leg attempt from Yan. O'Malley showing off his athleticism and balance to scramble out of it. Very, very nice. We'll skip through. Won't have to wait long before we get some more stuff to take a look at. Here's another single leg attempt, I believe. No, it's actually... He did the what he was trying there. He was just trying to close the distance and getting on the legs. Now it's a single leg. Yan's looking for an inside trip. Doesn't get it. Again, beautiful balance from O'Malley. And this is a very nice deep double leg attempt here. Look at that. Beautiful deep double leg. And O'Malley sees it coming from a mile away and sprawls out of it. Look at that. Look at that. And this is where Aljamain could potentially get into trouble, because the reason why O'Malley was able to scramble out of this one and sprawl out of this one compared to all the others is because Yan, now that Yan is starting to get tired, he shot from much further outside of a range than he had previously in the fight. So if you think about it, all previous takedown attempts from Yan in this fight have been where Yan's come forward, closed the distance, and then when O'Malley is trapped in an uncomfortable range up against the cage, that's when Yan would shoot the takedown in close proximity, so he'd get in really nice and deep on O'Malley's legs. From this position, this is really the first takedown that Yan shot out of distance in kickboxing range, which is O'Malley's bread and butter, and because of that, O'Malley read it and saw it coming from a mile away. I mean, look at this distance. This is a much wider distance on this takedown attempt than any of the others, and because of that, O'Malley reads it and he can sprawl out of it. Now that is pretty notable, because a lot of Aljamain Sterling's takedown attempts come from that range. Remember what we were saying earlier on in the breakdown, where we were discussing how these two matched up when it came to striking, and we were saying that Aljamain is one of these guys that doesn't like to exchange. He likes to be all the way outside the range where you can't really land anything too impactful, because he's using his length to keep you out of that range where you can hurt him, or he's all the way on the inside working for takedowns. And so when you do see Aljamain shoot single legs, double legs from distance, which he does, you know, quite frequently, they tend to be coming from that range which Yan just shot from, which, you know, O'Malley may be able to neutralize using his incredible ability to read his opponent's takedown entries from subtle changes in their body language and their movement. But you can see here again, O'Malley gives up a very cheap takedown. We'll go through this position. So Yan drives him into the cage off sprawling out of that. He's kept hold of a single leg here. Yan's trying to move to the back, but O'Malley does a really good job of protecting his back by keeping it tight to the cage. Again, O'Malley going to wrist control here on his left side. Now tries to get an underhook there on the left side. Now he needs an underhook on the right side. He needs double underhooks here. So here he's relying on his balance, which is a dangerous game to play because obviously he's at risk of having his leg swept. So there are times when I feel O'Malley should go to the underhook and he doesn't. For example, here, he's preoccupied with landing short shots and elbows to Jan, but that's not helping him defend the takedown, and his lower body is very exposed. I mean, look at this. This underhook on the left side is very weak, and his legs are quite close together. When Jan drives in now, it's not going to be that difficult for him to connect his hands around O'Malley's legs and get the double leg by reaping O'Malley's legs off the cage, because in this position, O'Malley's kind of doing all the wrong stuff. There's no underhook on the right side. He's not creating a wide base. And because there's no underhook on the right side, Jan's been able to sneak his left hand around the back of O'Malley's legs. And at the moment, even though O'Malley does have this left underhook, if Jan can get past this, he can connect his hands together and get the double leg. This takedown came because O'Malley didn't go for an underhook on the right side. Because if you look here, right, Jan's left arm isn't around the back of O'Malley's right leg yet. If O'Malley had a deep underhook on the right side, it would make it much more difficult for Jan to get this takedown. But, I mean, we can't really see with the referee blocking the view, but O'Malley's right arm is up here somewhere. Why is he pushing down on the head? He should be fighting for an underhook. And because of that, you know, it's a mistake which ultimately results in him giving this takedown up. You know, Jan's got a tight grip on that O'Malley's right leg now, and he knows as soon as he can connect the other hand to his left arm, O'Malley's going to get taken down. And he keeps fighting, eventually gets his hands connected, and it's over. So, you know, it's tricky. In that position, O'Malley is relying on his balance to keep the fight standing, and he's trying to score in that position by landing those short shots. But for me, I would just say, fuck the short shots, focus on underhooks, and just deal with the takedown. Because on the feet, you're winning. So just focus on not getting taken down. O'Malley obviously made some mistakes in this fight with his takedown defense. You see again here. And in this sequence, obviously, we've got the cage grabs and all that stuff. But ultimately, the cage grabs aren't all that. There's one there. Cage grabs aren't all that relevant in the bigger picture of analysing this fight, because ultimately O'Malley is giving up cheap double legs, and that isn't impacted by the cage grabs. You know, we're focusing on O'Malley's takedown defense at the end of the day, and we can see from these double legs that he's giving up that it isn't great, and it's not great against someone like Peter Yan, who's nowhere near the MMA grappler that Aljamain Sterling is. And so, yeah, the cage grabs may have influenced this fight, but they don't really give us information with the Aljamain fight. And again, you can see, you know, outside trip there from Yan. Tricky. So look, let's bring this one full circle. We spent a long time on this fight. The only thing that I want to focus on before we wrap this fight up, is that in the past, Aljamain Sterling has been someone that would slow down a lot as fights wore on. And in that third round, he would start to get tired, and then he would become very beatable when he faded. What I can tell you is that Aljamain Sterling's cardio has looked absolutely fantastic in his last three fights against Henry Cejudo, in particular the rematch against Peter Yan. So these days, Aljamain does a much better job of pacing himself. So if these two are fighting, 3-4 years ago, I would have said, the early stages of this fight are going to be difficult for O'Malley, because Sterling's going to be able to get him down and dominate him. But if O'Malley can just weather that early storm, I think he can take over in the third, fourth and fifth round. That's going to be a lot more difficult to do now, because not only is Aljamain better at pacing himself across a 25-minute fight, but he's also improved his cardio a decent amount as well. So for me, this is a really difficult fight from a betting point of view, because when you look at how sketchy O'Malley's takedown defense is against Peter Yan, how weak he looked at times on the ground. A very high-level MMA grappler like Aljamain Sterling with crushing grappling control should be able to get O'Malley down and cause him big problems on the ground. I can see O'Malley getting absolutely mauled in this fight. But Aljamain Sterling is a big favourite. There's very little upside in betting him in this odds range. You know, his odds are improving a little bit, but not enough to make me want to bet Aljamain Sterling. These odds, in my opinion, kind of reflect the advantages that Sterling has in this fight. So for me, Sterling is a pass. But on the flip side, I don't see enough from Sean O'Malley to make me want to roll the dice on him. Like you guys know, I bet underdogs all the time, right? If we look at our pre-fight betting results, a lot of my bets are in the even money odds range or underdogs, right? If we take a look at it, where are we? So we bet on an underdog here, Justin Gaethje. Underdog here, Irene Aldana. If we go on to page 2, underdog here, Jasmine Jasudavicius. Underdog Chase Hooper. Underdog Belal Muhammad, Cortez Acosta. Underdog Pedro Munhoz. Like, I've got no problem rolling the dice on a high-risk underdog. But if I'm going to bet on a high-risk underdog, I need them to have a clear and obvious path to victory. And I don't like their opponents to have any significant advantages in the area that the underdog is particularly weak. Let me explain. I don't want to talk about the O'Day Osborne bet because it was basically a hedge out of this parlay that I placed. So these two kind of cancel one another out. Let's talk about like the proper underdog bets, right? When we researched the fight between Justin Gaethje and Dustin Poirier, we identified that Justin Gaethje was better than Dustin Poirier at this stage in their career in virtually every single aspect of MMA. So at underdog odds, Gaethje gave us a great risk to reward ratio. With Irene Aldana, we saw in Amanda Nunes' first fight against Juliana Pena that if you make her work hard, she will gas extremely bad around about the second round. And we knew Irene Aldana was a cardio machine that could push a high pace. So at decent underdog odds, Aldana was a decent bet because she had a clear edge, clear advantage over an area that Nunes was particularly weak. If you look at our bet on Jasmine Jasudavicius, we know that Miranda Maverick's takedown defense is very bad. She's very weak off her back. We know Jasmine Jasudavicius, very good offensive wrestler with the cardio to persistently grapple for 15 minutes. Jasudavicius put on a grappling clinic, dominated the fight. That was another example of an underdog bet where Jasudavicius was particularly strong in an area that Maverick was weak. Chase Hooper, significantly better grappler than Nick Fury, much better grappler, much better cardio as well. He dominated that fight, should never have been the underdog. Belal Muhammad, we know that Gilbert Burns slows down a lot as fights wear on. We know Belal Muhammad's a cardio machine. In a 25-minute fight, taking Belal Muhammad, absolute no-brainer at underdog odds. Cortez Acosta was a really bad bet. I regret that one. And then Pedro Munhoz, we know that he was a much higher level on the ground than Chris Gutierrez. We also know that Gutierrez has a kicks-based style of striking, whereas Pedro Munhoz has a boxing-based style of striking. Boxers tend to do pretty well against kickers. Obviously, Munhoz came through for us at very nice, juicy underdog odds. A bet on Sean O'Malley this weekend doesn't fit the profile of any of those kind of underdogs because Sean O'Malley is particularly weak in the area that Aljamain Sterling is particularly strong. As we know from the Petr Yan fight, O'Malley tends to give up very weak takedowns. He's weak off his back. Aljamain Sterling, a very, very strong grappler. So for me, this fight is a very, 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 very easy pass because neither guy is in a position where they're better than their opponent everywhere. It's risky to bet Sterling because, you know, O'Malley can cause him problems on the feet. But it's risky to bet O'Malley because, I mean, you'd have to be blind to watch that Petr Yan fight and not see how Sterling could cause him big problems with his grappling. So for me, it's an easy pass. Don't put your money in danger this weekend. Just avoid this fight and enjoy it. Enjoy it as a fan. But if you bet this one, I think you're putting your money in a lot of danger. Now, in terms of the over-under on this one, I do think it's more likely this fight ends inside the distance, because if O'Malley wins, I think it will be brutally violent in the form of a flash KO. And I don't mean to say flash KO in like a fluky, lucky, derogatory way, because I think O'Malley's brilliant. I mean, he just catches Aljamain Sterling with like an accurate kill shot that he sets up by being brilliant at what he does. If Sterling wins this fight, it could be by decision, but with how aggressive, how dangerous Sterling is on the ground, from what I saw against Peter Yan, I'm skeptical as to whether O'Malley has the ground game to defend himself against someone as physically imposing on the ground as Sterling. I mean, I know Dillashaw had dislocated a shoulder, but we saw what Sterling did to TJ in that fight. In terms of, you know, O'Malley doing pretty well in BJJ contests and things like that, the tricky aspect of this for me is Sterling is just very physically imposing on the ground. Very, very aggressive. So, yeah, it is one of those situations where I think both guys can really cause the other a lot of problems in their area that they're strong. So a finish is quite likely in this one. I'm not going to be betting the over-under myself, but my lean is on this one not to go to a decision. In terms of the prop bets, yeah, I don't really like the odds on the props, if I'm honest. There's nothing I really like. You know, Sterling by submission is steep. O'Malley by knockout TKO is steep. Yeah, I don't like the odds on that. I would pass on that one, guys, if I were you. And my dog's just going crazy, which is a good time to move on to the next fight. Alright, now let's break down the next fight between Amanda Lemos and Weili Zhang. So if we start off by taking a look at the odds on this one, we can see that Weili Zhang is a pretty big favourite at average odds of around 1.31, which is going to be minus 323 for an implied probability of 76%. If we take a look at the odds on Amanda Lemos, she's around an average of 3.65, which is going to be plus 265 for an implied probability of 27%. So Amanda Lemos is 36 years old, 5'4" with a 65-inch reach, and Weili Zhang, 34 years old, 5'4" with a 63-inch reach. So we can see both girls roughly the same age, roughly the same size as well, not a major size difference between these two. And obviously they're two of the biggest hitters in the division, very athletic, very powerful, very, very physically imposing. So this is an interesting matchup because both these girls have a lot of the same strengths and weaknesses, in that they both slow down quite a lot as fights progress. They both have true legit knockout power, and they are both... I'm not going to say what I was going to say then, because I will just end up repeating myself when we discuss the grappling. They have a lot of the same strengths and weaknesses though, and we'll get into that as we go through this fight. So if we start off with the striking, they have very different styles, and because of the different styles, it's kind of difficult to know who's going to come out on top. So out of the two, Amanda Lemos is far more technical and far better defensively. One of Weili Zhang's big problems is that she is a little bit reckless on the feet, and she doesn't read her opponents particularly well. You know, this is the reason why she took so much damage against Joanna Jędrzejczyk and was knocked out in the first fight against Rose Namajunas. She is a bit of a sitting duck on the feet. Now, don't get me wrong, she is absolutely tough as nails and she's got a great chin. But there aren't many girls in the division that hit as hard as Amanda Lemos. And so Lemos having that true legit knockout power could make Weili Zhang pay for being very bad defensively here. Now, Amanda Lemos is much better defensively than Zhang. She uses her length very well. She reads her opponents much better than Zhang. And she's an absolute sniper. You make one mistake, you overcommit to one strike, and she can pick you off with a big counter. That doesn't necessarily mean that Lemos will win this fight on the feet though. Because one huge issue with Lemos is that because she slows down so much as fights wear on, all her power comes at a cost. She doesn't throw a particularly high volume of strikes. She does have that sniper approach. One big kick, one big punch. And Lemos purely slows down from the power that she has. Zhang, on the other hand, tends to slow down from doing a lot of stuff. Zhang is one of these fighters that fights at a very high pace and she's always working. She's always trying to take you down. She's always trying to improve position or beat you up on the ground. She's always in your face, forcing you to exchange on the feet. So while Lemos is a lot better defensively, more accurate, probably has more knockout power than Zhang, Zhang fights at a much higher pace, throws much more volume than Lemos. So Lemos will likely be landing the harder, more impactful strikes on the feet, but Zhang will probably be outworking her and outstriking her by a wide margin. The problem for Zhang is that Zhang likes to come forward with reckless abandon, get in her opponent's face and attack them. And in those moments is when she's going to be very vulnerable to the big counters of Lemos. Now, where this works against Zhang, because in order for Zhang to fight like she usually fights, she's going to have to come forward and be very aggressive, which will put her at risk of eating a big counter shot and getting knocked out. That also kind of works in Zhang's favour, because the key to beating Lemos is to not allow her to pace herself. So what Lemos wants to do is stand in kickboxing range in that nice big wide stance with her right hand cocked, ready to go. And every time you come forward, she's going to let that right hand go to try and catch you with a big counter. The opponents that Lemos has success against are the opponents that respect her power. And they allow her to dictate the pace. They allow her to just stand there like a coiled spring, waiting for you to come forward and attack her. But they don't really press the action. They don't really force Lemos to work. They allow her to pace herself, and they allow her to dictate the pace of the fight when they exchange, when she goes, when she resets. The fighters that will cause Lemos a problem are the ones that don't respect her power. The ones that get inside, force her to work, force her to defend takedowns, beat her up in the clinch, and force her to exchange. And they fight on their terms, not hers. Which is exactly what Weili Zhang does. Weili Zhang comes forward recklessly, aggressively, and forces you to engage. And that is the worst stylistic matchup imaginable for Amanda Lemos. The problem is, in order to fight like that, you need to get into Lemos's face and force her to engage. And when you force Amanda Lemos to engage, you put yourself at risk of being knocked out because of how accurate she is, how fast she is, how much power she's got in her hands. So both these girls pose significant threats to one another on the feet. What I would say is that Zhang's cardio is a lot better than Lemos's. And if Zhang can just avoid being knocked out in the first 6 or 7 minutes, so long as she's making Lemos work very hard, I think Zhang will take over big time and cause Lemos big problems when she fades. The reason why Lemos did so well against Marina Rodriguez and was able to get the knockout in round 3, the reason why she didn't slow down in the Marina Rodriguez fight is because Rodriguez respected her power, didn't make her work hard, allowed Lemos to completely dictate the pace of the fight, so that by the 3rd round, Lemos was still fresh enough to deliver a shot with knockout power. Zhang, if she makes Lemos work very hard, this fight becomes a lot harder for Lemos into that 3rd, 4th, 5th round. And don't forget, Zhang's got a lot of experience in 5-round fights now. A lot of experience going deep. This will be Lemos' first 5-rounder, and to be fair, not many of her fights have gone the distance. So Zhang will be a lot better at pacing herself in a high-paced fight. Now, in terms of grappling, this fight is a very interesting one because both of them are kind of similar when it comes to grappling. They've both got the same strengths and weaknesses in the sense that both girls are good offensive MMA grapplers, but very bad defensive MMA grapplers, in the sense that when they are trying to take their opponents down or they get in the top position, they're both very good. Lemos and Zhang both have good offensive wrestling and good grappling control. They're very physically imposing on the ground. But if you try to take them down, their takedown defense is very bad and they're very, very weak off their back. Cast your mind back to Weili Zhang's second fight against Rose Namajunas, where she kept giving up cheap takedowns and looked very, very weak off her back. Lemos has looked very, very weak off her back as well. So this is one of those fights where they're both kind of similar on the ground, but I personally give Weili Zhang the advantage on the ground because she's more likely to look for a takedown. You know, Lemos understands that when she grapples, she burns through a lot of energy. So Lemos, in an effort to pace herself, doesn't ever really try to take her opponents down because she wants to conserve that energy for striking and fighting closer to her full potential for longer. Whereas Zhang's not really thinking about that. Zhang's much more aggressive, so she'll mix up the striking, the takedowns, look to take you down and beat you up. So on the ground, Zhang does have the advantage because she's more likely to be the aggressor, more likely to be in top position because ultimately she's more likely to try and take Lemos down. And I'm also noticing big improvements from fight to fight from Zhang's grappling. We all know how difficult Joanna Jędrzejczyk is to take down and hold down. Now, Jędrzejczyk built a career off having really good takedown defense, and yet Zhang was able to completely ragdoll her on the ground and get her down pretty easily. So if Zhang's able to get someone like Jędrzejczyk down, who's got some of the best takedown defense in the history of women's MMA, then Amanda Lemos is probably going to be in a lot of trouble, because I'd imagine Zhang would get Lemos down very easily with how much better Joanna Jędrzejczyk's takedown defense is than Lemos's. So what does all this mean from a betting point of view? It means that Weili Zhang's way more likely to win this fight and should absolutely be the favourite in this one. If the fight stays standing, so long as Weili Zhang doesn't get knocked out, she should be able to outwork and outpoint and outvolume Lemos. And on the ground, she also has an advantage because Lemos never tries to take anyone down, but she herself is pretty weak off her back and easy to take down. And we know based on the Jędrzejczyk fight, and to be fair, the Carla Esparza fight, that these days Zhang is way more willing to mix things up, you know, use grappling heavy game plans instead of just trying to stand in front of her opponents and stand and bang and play rock'em sock'em robots and knock them out. Zhang is developing into a much more complete fighter these days, whereas Lemos really only has that one path to victory with the striking, where she needs to knock Weili Zhang out. I also feel that Weili Zhang has the better cardio out of the two. Both definitely slow down as fights wear on, but Weili Zhang tends to slow down because she just does a lot of stuff and burns herself out, whereas Lemos just naturally slows down by having big muscles and a lot of power that zaps a lot of energy. So this is one of those fights where Zhang is absolutely the more likely to win. She deserves to be the favourite. But again, like with Aljamain Sterling, I do feel Weili Zhang's advantages are mostly baked into the odds. And so it's impossible to bet Weili Zhang at these odds. She's way too big of a favourite. There's just no upside in betting her in this odds range. It's an easy pass. On the flip side, I don't like the idea of rolling the dice on Amanda Lemos either, because I think if Zhang grapples, Lemos gets out grappled, and I think so long as Zhang makes it through the first 6 or 7 minutes, with how aggressive Zhang usually fights, Lemos is likely going to be too tired to knock her out. So even though Lemos could get a knockout early, we know Zhang's tough, she's got a good chin, she may grapple hard early, put Lemos on her back, which significantly reduces the chances of Zhang getting knocked out, because she'll wear Lemos down with grappling early by the time Lemos gets a chance to knock her out on the feet. So I don't see enough path to victory for Lemos for me to want to roll the dice on her either. So this fight is just an easy pass. You're not getting a particularly good risk to reward ratio no matter who you bet on. There are no strong positions for us on this fight. It's an easy pass. Let me know if you disagree in the comments below. But I will not be betting this one. I'm not even tempted to bet this fight. In terms of the over-under, I'd be very surprised if the fight went the distance. I think either Weili Zhang is going to get knocked out, or I think it'll get to the point where Lemos will get too tired to defend herself and she'll get stopped either standing up or on the ground. I'd be very, very surprised if this one went to a decision. Yeah, very, very surprised. But obviously the odds are extremely steep on that. So again, gotta let the odds do the work for you. You can't bet on that. Now, if we take a look at the prop bets on this one, you might want to go for something like Zhang to win in round 3, maybe, because I think by that point in the fight, you know, Lemos may be getting to the stage where she's too tired to defend herself. Something like that. Maybe Zhang by submission. You know, I know that she tends to favour ground and pound on the ground. However, you know, she has got the odd submission win here and there. There's an armbar there. You know, there's a submission in her last fight against Esparza. You know, there's a few submission wins dotted around. You know, it might get to the stage where Lemos is just too tired to defend herself on the ground and she gives Zhang a cheap submission. So yeah, could look at Zhang by submission, could look at Zhang in round 3. I'm not a fan of props, I won't be betting them myself, but if you're the type of person that wants to bet a little bit of money on every fight to make watching them more interesting, those are some prop options for you. So I hope you found that breakdown useful. Let me know what you think in the comments below. And hit the like button if you like this breakdown. Now let's get into the next fight on this card, which is going to be Garry versus Magny. So if we start off by taking a look at the odds on this one, we can see that... Where is he? Let's scroll down. Where's this fight? I can't even see it. Let's search for Garry's surname. Can't find it. Sorry guys, there it is right in front of me. Okay, so Garry is the favourite at average odds of around 1.23, which is going to be minus 435 for an implied probability of 81%. We take a look at the odds on Magny. He's around an average of 4.50, which is going to be plus 350 for an implied probability of 22%. So Garry, 25 years old, 6'3" with a 74-inch reach. And Magny, 36 years old, 6'3" with an 80-inch reach. So, I am very, 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 very high on Garry. I think he's absolutely the real deal. I think he's a brilliant fighter. I think he's got a huge future in the sport. And it isn't very often you see a guy like Garry at just 25 years old that is this good at 25 years old. Like, imagine what he's going to be when he's 31, 32 years old with another 6 or 7 years of improvement in him. He trains at a good gym. He's got a good chin. He's tough as nails. You know, we saw him hurt bad in the Keenan Song fight and recover. Cardio's great. Chin's great. Tough as nails. Grappling's good. Takedown defense is good. Striking's good. The whole package. To me, Garry looks like a guy with zero weaknesses. I'm very, 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 very impressed by Garry. I think he's excellent. And I think this is absolutely a passing of the guard fight where he's going to be able to pick up a very impressive and dominant win over, you know, a relatively big name in Magny. I don't see any way Magny wins this fight. I'd be very, 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 very surprised if Magny were to cause Garry any problems at all. And this is one of those really rare matchups where I would even go as far as saying that Garry is significantly better than Magny in every single aspect of MMA. Significantly better striker, significantly better grappler, and at this stage more durable as well. I mean, maybe Magny's got the better cardio, but it won't matter in this fight because Garry's got great cardio too. So, in terms of how these two match up stylistically, we'll make this a quick one because, you know, there's not a lot to talk about. If this fight stays standing, Magny does throw a high volume of strikes. He does have good footwork, good movement, but he doesn't have any power in his hands. He doesn't have any pop in his shots. Garry is great defensively, throws a good volume of strikes, and has true legit one-shot knockout power. He lands mean, accurate, powerful, fight-ending strikes. And I think he's going to land the way more significant, impactful, meaningful strikes on Magny. Magny may have some decent volume where he'll touch, Garry with the jabs and the leg kicks, but I think Magny is going to take far more damage in this, and he doesn't have power in his hands to give him the chance of landing a flash knockout either. So I think Garry's going to dominate this fight on the feet. When it comes to grappling, we know that Neil Magny's takedown defense is very bad. He's also very weak off his back. He's also not the best offensive wrestler. So Garry doesn't have anything to worry about with grappling either. I think this fight's going to stay standing. I think Garry is going to light Magny up and look very, very impressive this weekend. I think Garry will win very dominantly. Unfortunately, he's a big favourite, and his advantages are reflected by his odds. So while I do think Garry is very likely to win this weekend, his odds kind of reflect that. No upside in betting on him. And because this is such a tough stylistic matchup for Neil Magny, I am 0% tempted to bet Neil Magny in this fight. I think he gets absolutely smoked. I would not touch Magny this weekend. So it looks like the props haven't loaded here. Oh, they have now. They have now. Okay. So let's take a look at the props on this one. The only prop I would go for is Garry by decision. I do think he'll land a lot of damage on Magny. But Magny's very tough, very difficult to put away. Even at this stage in his career, he's still tough as nails. It's not easy to finish Magny unless you're submitting him on the feet. Because of his footwork, his movement, his cardio, his length, he's very, very difficult to put away. And so, I think Garry will win this fight comfortably, but I think he'll go to a decision. So if you really, really want to bet this fight, look at the over, or look at Garry to win by decision. I'm not going to be betting either of those, but if you want to bet this fight to make watching it a little bit more interesting, Garry by decision or the over, I think, are probably the best bets on this fight. So I hope you found that useful. Also, don't forget that if you do like these breakdown videos, you can watch breakdowns for all the prelim fights on this card over on my website, MMABettingTips.com. So they're kind of like strategy guide videos. If you're going to be betting the fights this weekend, you'll get the same sort of breakdown videos on my website for the prelim matchups that you'll get on these main card fights. So now, let's break down the next fight between Blackshear and Mario Bautista. So if we start off by taking a look at the odds on this one again, because it's a late notice fight, might be tricky to find the odds. Let's just search for Bautista's surname. There we go. So we can see that Mario Bautista is the favourite. Average odds are around 1.44, which is going to be minus 227 for an implied probability of 69%. If we take a look at the odds on Blackshear, he's around an average of 2.85, which is going to be plus 185 for an implied probability of 35%. So Blackshear is 29 years old, 5'10" with a 72-inch reach, and Bautista, 30 years old, 5'9" with a 69-inch reach. So both guys roughly the same age, roughly the same size. Nothing major in terms of size difference. Obviously, Blackshear's got that small, muscular, compact frame. He is a little bit longer and taller than Bautista, but Bautista does have that longer, leaner frame out of the two. And obviously, Blackshear is also taking the fight on short notice after picking up a win just last weekend against Jose Johnson. Now, obviously, it was a very easy fight for Blackshear. He got Johnson down, submitted him in round 1, didn't take any damage. So he should be coming into this fight absolutely fine, unscathed. The only way in which I think the short notice could affect Blackshear is if he had a brutal weight cut for the Johnson fight, and now he's got to go through another brutal weight cut for this fight. But outside of that, Blackshear's pretty much coming on a full camp because we saw him fight Johnson last Saturday. So this is a classic striker versus grappler matchup. Blackshear the grappler, Mario Bautista the striker. If the fight stays standing, Bautista is going to do very, very well here. I love Bautista's boxing. He throws a very high volume of strikes. He's got great cardio, really good technique as well. Bautista is an amazing MMA striker. Blackshear, on the other hand, because he's predominantly a grappler, he's a little bit awkward on the feet. Stands a little bit flat-footed and doesn't throw a particularly high volume of strikes. He's not that accurate. He's not that technical. He is powerful because he's a big, explosive guy, but he's not going to be able to match Bautista in terms of technique. Bautista is going to be levels and levels and levels above Blackshear when it comes to striking. So if the fight stays standing, Bautista should be able to outstrike Blackshear pretty comfortably. Now, when it comes to grappling, we haven't seen tons of Bautista's takedown defense, but from what we have seen, his takedown defense and ground game looks pretty good. He's trained at the MMA lab for a really long time, which is obviously a good gym. With the exception of Brian Barberena, MMA lab is very, very good at producing guys with good takedown defense. Mario Bautista, from what we've seen, the flashes of takedown defense we've seen from him, he does look very difficult to take down. He also looks very difficult to hold down. Whenever we've seen Bautista taken down, he's done a really good job of quickly scrambling back up to his feet. Blackshear is a good offensive wrestler, decent grappling control, but he doesn't have the most physically imposing ground game. He doesn't have that kind of Jeremiah Wells style crushing grappling control. So while he may get Bautista down in this fight, I do think from what I've seen from both guys, it will be difficult for him to hold Mario Bautista down for long enough to really have a big impact on this matchup. So the way I look at this fight from a betting point of view is the odds are pretty much where they should be. Bautista should be a big favourite because he's got a big advantage over Blackshear when it comes to striking, and Bautista's takedown defense is good enough to make it very difficult for Blackshear to get takedowns. And even if Blackshear does get him down, Bautista has shown that he's very difficult to hold down. Does a good job of quickly popping back up. So the majority of this fight should take place on the feet, and if it stays on the feet, Bautista should win because he's a much better striker than Blackshear. So for me, unfortunately, this is another one of those fights where the odds are exactly where they should be. Bautista deserves to be the favourite because it's likely to be a stand-up fight. Bautista's the better striker, but Bautista's odds are too steep for me to want to bet him. On the flip side, I'm not tempted to bet Blackshear at underdog odds because he's probably going to find it difficult to get Bautista down and hold him down. So this fight is an easy pass for me, and because the fight was only announced very recently, we don't have prop bets or over-under odds or anything like that, so we can't talk about that yet. Hope you found that useful. Let me know how you see that fight playing out by leaving a comment below. And again, if you like these breakdown videos, please hit the like button below as well. The next fight we're going to be breaking down is Marlon Vera against Pedro Munhoz. And again, if you like these breakdown videos and you want to watch breakdown videos for all the prelim fights on this card, head on over to my website, MMABettingTips.com. On there, I break down every single fight on every single UFC card, summarize my research, and you can use those videos as a strategy guide for placing your own bets on every single UFC event. You'll also get access to a private Discord server, so I think you'll get a lot of value out of. Now, let's break down the fight between Marlon Vera and Pedro Munhoz, the final fight on this main card. So we can see that, again, the reason why I'm having problems finding the odds on this card is because the best fight odds have split them into two categories. You've got some odds here, and then you've got some odds down here as well, which is very, very annoying. Anyway, Marlon Vera is the favourite at average odds of around 1.50, which is going to be minus 200 for an implied probability of 67%. If we take a look at the odds on Pedro Munhoz, we can see that he is the underdog at average odds of around 2.65, which is going to be 38%. So Marlon Vera is 30 years old, 5'8", with a 70.5-inch reach. Pedro Munhoz, 36 years old, 5'6", with a 65-inch reach. So a couple of X factors in favour of Marlon Vera here. The first one being that he is 6 years older than Pedro Munhoz. So statistically, this gives Marlon Vera about a 65% chance of winning if you're purely basing Vera's chances of winning on that age statistic. However, statistics are only as useful as how they're interpreted, right? They're only useful if they're interpreted correctly. And what the age statistics kind of highlight is that young hungry bulls who are on an upward career trajectory and making big improvements from fight to fight tend to have a big advantage over older, aging, declining fighters. So if you've got a 6-year age gap when a 32-year-old is fighting a 26-year-old, that probably statistically isn't going to give the 26-year-old much of an advantage because the 32-year-old is in their prime. But in situations like this where you've got a 30-year-old fighting a 36-year-old, that's where this statistic can start to become really, really meaningful, because Pedro Munhoz is going to be 37 years old next month, and he's at that stage in his career where he's going to be declining significantly from fight to fight. We know the lighter weight classes tend to decline earlier in their careers because the lighter weight classes are all about speed, reflexes and athleticism. They're some of the first things to go as you start to get older. So Pedro Munhoz is at that stage in his career where his athletic performance is going to start falling off a cliff. There will always be outliers like Daniel Cormier, but as a general rule, 36, 37, 38 years old is when you start to rapidly decline, particularly in the lighter weight classes. Vera, on the other hand, at 30 years old, he's in his prime. He's going to be getting better from fight to fight, and that gives him a statistical edge in this matchup. He also has a 5-inch reach advantage over Pedro Munhoz, which gives him another statistical edge. Obviously, he's a little bit taller as well, but we know fighters that have a 5-inch reach advantage over their opponent tend to win around 65% of the time. So exactly the same as the age stat. So Marlon Vera has got two strong trends in his favour with his reach advantage and him being a lot younger than Munhoz. So before we even get into how these two match up from a stylistic point of view, you can see that Vera has some strong trends, some strong statistics on his side, which generally speaking are not the most smart thing to try and fight against. Because if you know that the younger fighter wins 65% of the time when there's a 6-year age gap in a fight, and the guy with the 5-inch reach advantage wins when there's a 5-inch reach advantage to that guy in a fight, do you really want to try and push a boulder up a mountain and cherry pick that 1 in 3 times, that 35% of bets where those statistics don't, predict the most likely outcome? For me, that is making life very, very difficult for yourself. I think it's way smarter in this game to find bets where the trends are on your side and you've overwhelmingly stacked the odds in your favour. And of course, this is a big part of our approach to betting, one of our big principles, where if we see situations like this, where a guy like Marlon Vera has a lot of strong trends on his side, we're going to move out the way of those trends. We're not going to try and fight them because we know statistically trying to beat those trends over the long term is going to be very difficult. It's going to be very, very difficult to try and make a profit long term betting against trends such as those. So no matter how these two match up from a stylistic point of view, could be a dangerous game to bet Pedro Munhoz this weekend. But I will kick this breakdown video off by saying I am extremely tempted to bet Pedro Munhoz because he does a lot of things which I think can cause Marlon Vera a big, big problem. Let's start off with grappling because that's going to be the easiest aspect of this fight to discuss. So, if Pedro Munhoz were to come into this fight with a grappling heavy game plan, if he were to walk to the octagon with a wrestling singlet on, he would absolutely dominate this fight. If you called me up, say you could see into the future, right? Say Jesus phoned me up and he was like, Chris, I've seen into the future. I absolutely guarantee you Pedro Munhoz will grapple his ass off in every round of this fight. I would be like, nice one, Jesus. I've actually got a phone I just use it as a prop, right? Nice one, Jesus. Wicked. I'm going to go sell my house, sell my cars, sell my son, sell my wife. Bet it all on Pedro Munhoz this weekend. Then I'm going to make tons of money and I'm going to buy them all back. and I'm going to be fucking rich, because this is going to be an absolute cakewalk for Pedro Munhoz. This is one of those fights where if Pedro Munhoz uses a grappling heavy game plan, he will absolutely dominate Marlon Vera, because Pedro Munhoz has good offensive wrestling, good grappling control, a heavy top game, and he's an ultra high level Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt. Marlon Vera has a base in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, but Vera is one of these fighters, similar to Polyana Viana last weekend. One of the main reasons, if you watched last week's video, one of the main reasons why we bet on Yasmin Lucindu to beat Polyana Viana is because Viana is one of these fighters with a base in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu that just gives up cheap takedowns and just spends way too long on her back hunting for long shot submissions without showing more urgency to get back up to her feet, right? That was the basis for betting Lucindu last weekend, and look what happened. Aside from a little blip early in round one, she dominated Viana on the ground. Well, Marlon Vera's got exactly the same weakness on the ground as Polyana Viana. Because he has a base in BJJ, and he wants to be on his back attacking with submissions, if you shoot a takedown on Marlon Vera, he barely even tries to stuff it. He'll be more than happy to pull guard, try and defend it with a guillotine and end up on his back, leap to his back, whatever. He'll give up the takedown very, very easily. And then instead of showing urgency to work his way back up to his feet on the ground, he'll just hunt for long shots, arm bars and triangles off his back, exactly like Polyana Viana. And every once in a while, a fighter like Vera or a fighter like Polyana Viana will hit a Hail Mary armbar or a triangle off their back, and everyone will think they're amazing. When in reality, they're not amazing. They're just catching guys with bad top games in bad positions. But when you've got someone like a Yasmin Lucindu that knows how to neutralize an active guard from top position, or a very high-level Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt like Pedro Munhoz, guys like Marlon Vera just aren't going to be able to cause him any problems off his back. And so if Munhoz were to use a grappling heavy game plan this weekend, Marlon Vera is absolutely screwed. Now, when the fight when we're talking about how these two match up stylistically when it comes to striking, there's also a lot that Pedro Munhoz can do to cause Marlon Vera a problem. Because if we go all the way back to when Pedro Munhoz fought Chris Gutierrez, if you go back and watch my breakdown video for that fight, the main reason why we bet Pedro Munhoz to beat Chris Gutierrez is because Chris Gutierrez has a kicks-based style of striking and his boxing isn't very good. Pedro Munhoz has a boxing-based style of striking. And when boxers fight kickers, generally speaking, the boxer will have the advantage over the kicker because it's easier to punch someone in the face than it is to kick them in the head. If you think about a kicker like Marlon Vera, so Marlon Vera, very similar to Chris Gutierrez, also has a kicks-based style of striking. Marlon Vera's boxing isn't very good. In order for Vera to get kicks off, he needs time and space to be able to throw those kicks. And because Pedro Munhoz is a pressure fighter, he can take a lot of that space away because he likes to come forward, take control of the center of the octagon, force you onto the back foot. If you're constantly having to back up and circle away from Munhoz because of the pressure he's putting on you, you don't have the time and space to get your kicks off. In the middle of the octagon, Vera's kicking game is very effective because he's fighting you at distance in the middle of the octagon with lots of space around him to get his kicking game off. When he's on the back foot and pressured, he struggles. And that's exactly why Munhoz caused Gutierrez problems. Marlon Vera's boxing is very bad. If you go back and watch his fights, he doesn't read his opponents particularly well. His boxing's not that accurate. Just not a particularly good boxer. He's got nice elbows, nice kicks, nice knees, but his boxing's not great. Now, one aspect of Pedro Munhoz's kicking game which I like is that he's obviously got devastating leg kicks. One of Munhoz's biggest weapons are his leg kicks. But I do think he'll find it difficult to land leg kicks in this fight because Vera's got good footwork, good movement, and that size and length of Vera will make it difficult for Munhoz to get inside into a range where he can get those leg kicks off. Obviously, you know, we can't discount his leg kicks. He's very effective with them, but I don't think they're going to be a massive factor in this one because the range and the stance and the way these two guys fight, the distance they like to fight at, it'll be difficult. Munhoz will be looking for the boxing way more than he'll be looking for the leg kicks in this one. So Munhoz can cause Vera a lot of problems in this fight if he can maintain pressure. If he can come forward, take control of the centre of the octagon and put a lot of pressure on Vera. On the feet, he'll cause Vera a lot of problem because Vera is not particularly good at backing up pressure fighters with boxing, and that pressure will make it difficult for Vera to get the time and space to get his kicks off. The biggest problem with Munhoz is that when striking, there's not always a lot of end product from him. So what you'll see from Munhoz a lot of the time is he'll come forward with a lot of pressure, he'll force you onto the back foot, he'll force you to fight in an uncomfortable range, but then he won't really let his hands go, and when he does, there won't be a particularly high volume, or he'll be a little bit inaccurate. And so in those situations, you could see Vera having some success outstriking Munhoz from the outside, which is essentially what Frankie Edgar did when he fought Pedro Munhoz. Now granted, Edgar is a better boxer than Marlon Vera. However, Vera's got a more diverse range of strikes that he can go to if Munhoz is going to come forward and pressure him without a whole lot of end product. So in terms of wrapping everything up that I've just said, this is definitely a dog or pass fight. You would have to be absolutely crazy, in my opinion, to bet Marlon Vera as a big favourite. Because if Pedro Munhoz chooses to grapple, Vera is absolutely screwed. And there is nothing you can tell me, or no footage which will change my mind on that. Vera's takedown defense is extremely bad, and he's very, very weak off his back. I know Pedro Munhoz never grapples. I know he's one of these guys that chooses to stand and bang. I know he's very stubborn. However, if Pedro Munhoz just thought, this one time I'm going to come in and grapple, Vera is absolutely screwed. So why would you want to bet on a big favourite that has such a huge weakness in their overall skill set that their opponent is very well positioned to exploit? It just isn't smart. Win or lose, you are putting your money in a really, really weak position if you bet Marlon Vera this weekend. This fight is absolutely dog or pass. If you want to bet this fight, you have to bet Pedro Munhoz, because we know he can dominate Vera with a grappling heavy game plan, and his boxing based style of fighting, his forward pressure and aggression can cause Vera a problem, because Vera's boxing is very bad. His kicks based style of striking will typically struggle against boxers. Personally, I'm not going to be betting this fight, because when you look at how these two match up, a trend that we see play out over and over and over again is that older fighters find ways to lose against younger fighters. And this year we've had countless examples of this, where there has been value on the older veteran underdog, like a Josh Emmett against an Ilia Topuria as an example, but ultimately the older guy just gets absolutely smoked by the young hungry bull, because Father Time's undefeated, and you know, older fighters decline, and younger fighters are young, hungry, motivated. They find ways to win. Pedro Munhoz is 37 years old next month. He's facing a guy that's got a 5-inch reach advantage over him. We know Vera's a dog. He's tough as nails. He's aggressive. He's ambitious. He's motivated. I don't want to bet against that, but this is absolutely dog or pass. If you do want to bet on this fight, you have to take Mr. Munhoz. Let me know what you think in the comments below. It's a great fight. I'm looking forward to seeing how it plays out. And yes, if Pedro Munhoz does win this weekend, I'll be very frustrated for passing on him. In terms of the over-under on this one, both these guys are tough as nails, both very difficult to finish. So it is more likely the fight will go to a decision. You can see the odds reflect that, with it being really steep favourite odds. So you can't bet that. So if you really want to bet the over-under on this one, I wouldn't recommend it. But you've kind of got to take fight not to go to a decision and let the odds do the work for you, because the underdog odds give you the better risk to reward ratio. Both guys are very dangerous. We know Vera's got nasty elbows, nasty knees, but they're both tough. They're both very difficult to put away. Even at this stage in Munhoz's career, he's still durable as hell. You know, you look at his record, and I can't remember the last time he was finished. I mean, he might never have been finished. Yeah, there you go. So Pedro Munhoz has never been finished. So both these guys are tough as nails. Very likely it goes to a decision. In terms of prop bets on this one, the only one that I would consider is Munhoz by decision. Again, I'm not going to be betting it, but if you want to place a prop to make watching this fight more interesting, I would take Munhoz by decision. Although, do you know what? I wouldn't actually bet that. That's actually a terrible bet, because the odds on Munhoz by decision aren't that much better than Munhoz money line, Munhoz straight. So if you really want to bet this fight, take Munhoz money line, and that'll be that. So I hope you found that breakdown useful. Hope you found this video useful. If you did, please hit the like button below, subscribe if you haven't already, and check out my website, MMABettingTips.com, link in the description below. Come live bet with me this weekend. It's my bread and butter. We make a profit almost every month. You'll absolutely love it, or you get your money back. Absolutely no problem, absolutely no risk to you. Give it a try, you'll be hooked. And yeah, if you like these breakdown videos, you want to watch breakdowns of all the prelim fights on this card, head on over to MMABettingTips.com, where you can check them out. But thank you very much, everyone, for watching. Take care. Love you all. Hope you make loads of money this weekend. I'll see you in next week's video. Nice one, guys. Bye.